Thank you for tuning in. My name is Richard Meadows. This is my channel. It was a channel originally dedicated to political content, but politics made me sad. I didn't want to be sad. D&D made me happy. I wanted to be happy. So I started converting this channel over to D&D content. I probably recorded 2 videos before the OGL incident happened. That being said, I stopped making videos because nothing I would have made was going to be heard during the OGL fiasco, and also I wasn't sure if, depending on how that went, if the videos would even be worth doing, or if I would even be allowed to post them. But the OGL's calmed down now, that whole situation's calmed down, and now there's a call for, third-party content. A lot of people who weren't willing to try it before are now eager to try it or looking into it, and myself included. I went to buy Tome of Heroes. But when I went to go buy it, I also looked on YouTube to see if I could find any content about it so I could know a little bit more before I agreed to let it be played at my table or before I spent money on it. I was very disappointed. There's not a lot of content on YouTube about Tome of Heroes. You'll find, people talking about it while it's on Kickstarter or pre-release or when it first released, talking a little bit about it, but like actual analysis or deep dives or series about Tome of Heroes just don't exist like they do for official content. So what I'm going to do is in this video you're about to watch, as well as the following videos, I'm going to take Tome of Heroes and compare it to official content, or look at it on its own if there is no comparison. And I'm going to show you the differences, where Tome of Heroes has better stuff, where its stuff is a little lacking, just so you're not afraid of power scale, because a lot of people are afraid third-party stuff is always busted. If I bring that to my table, it's going to be just a bunch of Super Saiyans and gods at level 4. I don't think that's going to be the case with what I've seen so far. And I'm excited to cover Tome of Heroes, give you content to ingest, and so when people who want to watch Tome of Heroes or play Tome of Heroes can watch these videos and say, all right, I'm going to include Tome of Heroes at my table so I can play some of these races and classes and use some of these spells. So this video is going to be beneficial to DMs. It's going to be beneficial to players. It's going to be beneficial to people who are just going to be playing with other people bringing Tome of Heroes to the game, or people who are interested about buying the book. After the video's over, please leave your comments. Let me know areas of improvement, or what you think, or if you have any opinions, or if you want content like this or other content. I would love all of that. I love feedback. So if you could, drop a like at the end of the video. Don't like before. Watch the video. See if you like the video before liking it. I'm not going to beg for your like. But do that and enjoy the video. A supreme being of the multiverse has selected 2 martial artists from different realities to decide which is the true disciple of the dragon. Let the battle commence. Hello all. My name is Richard Meadows. That doesn't matter to you because you are here to look at some Monk subclasses. Today I will be covering 2 different Monk subclasses from 2 different sources, official content and third-party content, and stacking them up side by side and comparing them at each subclass level. So when the subclass gains a new ability, which is going to be 3rd when you pick your monostatic tradition, 6th, 11th, and 17th. And then after that, I'll give a brief pros and cons and a little bit of my opinion on the overall subclasses. And then I will move on into the conclusion, in which I decide which is the overall best subclass. I won't just leave this up to myself. I have consulted with a few friends, a few other online D&D DMs, and kind of got a general consensus. And it does seem to be overwhelmingly one over the other. But we'll get to that when we get to that. The first point of order is we're going to talk about the monk as a class. Go over some important notes when creating a monk, when thinking about playing a monk, and when picking your subclasses. Then I'll talk about the two different sources and the two different monks. We'll do the comparisons, the pros, the cons, conclusions. Cool. Now that we have that out of the way, let's get into it. So first, we're going to start with the monk. The monk is a pretty interesting class overall. It is a combat-based class, but it's also meant to be a mental stat-based class as well. It has wisdom as one of its main abilities. Even though it's not a spellcaster, even though its key points don't increase based on wisdom modifiers, like how some spellcasters gain additional spell prepared based on that, wisdom mainly affects two things, and we'll get into those two things as we're going. They are combatants, so they do need high attack scores. They use dex as their attack and damage ability, because as a monk you can make unarmed strikes, but you use your dex instead of strength, because unarmed strikes are usually a strength-based attack in which you are proficient. Everyone is proficient in unarmed strikes. And then when it comes to damage, unless you have a special ability that allows a different damage dice, you do 1 plus your modifier. So anyone that doesn't have natural weapons or claws, I believe the tabaxi, I want to say the turtle, and a few others have where they do 1d4 plus strength. Outside of that, everyone does 1 plus strength. The monk, on the other hand, does dex, and they have a martial arts die that scales. The number one thing to consider when you're making your monk is that it's a mad build. It has multiple ability scores that you need to distribute points into. Like I've said, it uses wisdom. It has abilities that are based off of wisdom, saving DCs, all that stuff. It attacks with dexterity, and it's a melee combatant, so it needs constitution. It needs constitution because you're going to have low HP. It uses a 1d8 hit die. That's very low, especially for someone who's incentivized to be in melee combat. Compared to the fighter, the paladin, and the barbarian, which have 1d10, 1d10, and 1d12 respectively, 1d8 is just low. But that wouldn't be too bad if it wasn't for the fact that you're not going to have amazingly high AC. The monk is meant to be unarmored, technically. Written, you're allowed to wear armor, you just lose 2 benefits: unarmored defense and unarmored movement. When you have unarmored movement, there's a table in the player's handbook that you can find that shows how much extra movement speed you get that increases as you level up. But you only get that movement speed if you are unarmored. Unarmored defense allows you to use your dex modifier and your wisdom modifier, but you cannot wear armor or shields. Both of these abilities require you to have no shield. So, comparatively, if you have a rogue that has let's say, the rogue and the monk both have 17 in dex. The rogue has leather armor plus a shield, maybe. Let's leave the shield out. Let's say rogue doesn't have a shield. I don't think rogues even get proficiency in a shield. That's a whole rogue video. Whatever. So you have a rogue in leather armor. Leather armor is 11 plus dex. So you have plus 3. You have 14. 14 dex. And then you have the monk. Uses 10 plus dex, so we're at 13. Now, did you make wisdom your second highest score or constitution your second highest score? This is where being the mad build makes monk kind of complicated and not new player friendly, because if you go with a decent wisdom score, let's say you're getting a +2, or maybe depending on the racial modifiers a +3, so now you have 16 AC, which is awesome. But I getting a +3, in all three of those categories is going to mean you're going to have to dump all your other stats. So if you're doing standard array, that's going to be almost impossible. If you're doing point buy, you're going to suck at everything else. Your intelligence, your charisma, and your strength are all going to be low. Even worse, if you're doing rolling and you don't get great rolls, let's say you get 2 amazing rolls and everything else is subpar, you're going to be struggling making this decision. Are you going to have the low HP or are you going to have the low AC? That's a rough choice. Stack on top of that, you have, if you choose low, or if you choose to have low AC and have a decent HP, because you can still wear armor, right? Let's say you wear armor because you don't care about the extra movement, you don't care about the unarmored defense, you're just going to use, let's say, hopefully get studded leather armor, add your dex, have a good HP, and go in there and just wail on people. That also means you have chosen to have a low key DC. So whenever you use a monk ability that requires someone to make a saving throw against your key DC, which goes off of wisdom, it's going to be low. I believe it's 8 plus proficiency bonus plus wisdom modifier. So one of these 3 are going to be low. You can't have all 3 be high. Not realistically. Not without making great sacrifices elsewhere in the build. Now moving on from that difficulty, because you can overcome that. You pick the right race with the right racial spread. You maybe roll really well, or you do point buy and you role play your character extremely well with the low intelligence, low charisma, and low strength, or maybe you pick a race that supplements charisma over the main ones because you're not too worried about it as long as you get 16 in the other fields. So now we have a monk. When you use the monk has a key point pool. The key point pool is equal to, not plus, that's my mistake. The key point pool is equal to the monk level. So when you're level 3, you have 3 key points. And your pool is refilled whenever you take a short rest. So if you're in the right party that's using the adventuring day mechanic where you take 2 short rests, you shouldn't be having too much of an issue with key points. If you're in a party that likes to trudge along, or a more gritty combat kind of campaign where 1 short rest or no short rest in an adventuring day is probable, the monk's gonna struggle. You're gonna reserve your resources, and you're gonna end up being the guy at the end of the dungeon, but instead of having all of the potions that you should have used that you never used because you were afraid you would need them later, you're gonna have all these key points that you didn't use, so you were subpar, you didn't shine because you were like, maybe I will need them later. You also get martial arts die because now you're a monk. So remember, I mentioned earlier, your unarmed strikes don't do 1 plus strength. They do martial arts die plus dex. The martial arts die increase as you level up. First levels, it's 1d4. You're really going to benefit from using a weapon early on if you're in the lower levels until you get to 1d6, possibly even waiting until you're 1d8. Then once you're at the 1d8 martial arts die range, it might start benefiting you to just have no weapon at all but your fists. Especially because at some point your fists do become magical, so your unarmed strikes become magical, which is pretty dope. Now we talked about your key point pool, and we talked about your martial arts die and punching people. Flurry of blows is your bread and butter as a monk. You're going to expend a bonus action, burn a key point, and punch someone in the face twice. Now, I believe you can only do this after taking an attack. So if you spend your action doing something else, you can't then bonus action punch somebody in the face twice. You have to make an attack and then burn a key point and bonus action to punch them 2 times. Another bonus action ability that uses a key point, and these are going to be the 2 that are mostly used. There is also Stunning Strike that you will use on occasion, but that requires a key DC, so that goes back to making a decision early on. But Step of the Wind is a bonus action. It burns a key point, and you can either take the dash action or the disengage action when you use this ability. So you use Step of the Wind, burn a key point, and you can dash or disengage as a bonus action. It's a worse version of the Rogue's Cunning action, because the Rogue's Cunning action allows them also to hide, and it doesn't cost a resource. So it's a watered down Cunning action. And that's all I have for the overall Monk. There are plenty of videos out there about why the Monk is bad, why the Monk is great. I believe overall the Monk only works in parties that need a Monk, right? So if you want, a Monk can be a great infiltrator. A Monk can be a great combatant with hit and run tactics. A Monk could even make a good face of the party with having a high wisdom and medium charisma if you pick the right subclasses. So depending on what hole you want to fill in your party will decide what subclass you take. Now, I would recommend monks in smaller parties. If you have a 5, 6, 7 person party, which is big, you're going to have a hard time finding a place in which the monk fits in. Because you're going to have someone doing battlefield control. You're going to have someone tanking, someone doing damage. They're going to have all these other fields covered, and you're going to feel lackluster. You'll have the occasional stunning strike the boss. Oh, crowd goes wild. But 9 times out of 10, you're going to be outshined in anything you try to do. You're never going to be a better stealther than the rogue. You're never going to be a better damage dealer than the fighter. You're never going to be better at being in the thick of it and taking aggro than the barbarian. So just keep that in mind. Smaller parties, make sure you're filling a hole. Talk to your party, session 0. Say, hey, I want to play a monk. I want to play this kind of monk. So if I want to be the stealth infiltrator, be like Way of the Shadow monk, make sure that you're not competing with a stealthy ranger or a rogue assassin, or maybe your entire party is leaning into the stealth aspect, which could also be cool. So if you're doing a heist campaign, or everyone's like, yeah, I want to build on like ambushes, I want to build on like stealth, we want to be that party that like hits and goes. Cool, then you know that, and you can use that. But if you're bringing a monk to the party, you make sure you talk it out at session 0, or you will be disappointed. But that's enough about the monk. Let's get into the nitty gritty of it. The Tale of Two Dragon Monks. Today we'll be comparing the Way of the Ascendant Dragon from Fizban's Treasury of Dragons, found on page 13 and 14 respectively. The Way of the Dragon, the Way of the Ascendant Dragon from Fizban's, and versus the Way of the Dragon, found in Tome of Heroes by Kobold Press, pages 92 and mostly 93. Fizban's Treasury of Dragons is official content. It is 5e Wizards of the Coast official content, released not too long ago. Tome of Heroes is third-party content created by Kobold Press. It is a bunch of extra races, a bunch of extra classes, or subclasses. It doesn't bring new classes, it brings new subclasses because it's 5e, so it's still using the main classes. And then it has spells and it has a bunch of other stuff. It's a extra supplemental source book. Now, if I understand it correctly, Tome of Heroes, or Kobold Press's realm or reality, that their setting is something called Midgard or Southlands. I haven't done a lot of research into that. I will be doing a video where I deep dive into that and try and figure out more about that. The Wizards of the Coast 5th edition current setting is mostly Faerun, or the Forgotten Realms. So you have the Forgotten Realms. Fizban's Treasury of Dragon mostly is going to apply to that, because most of the setting modules or campaigns are going to be in the Forgotten Realms. You have Dragonlance that recently released that is not in the Forgotten Realms, and that's kind of cool. So that's something, if you want to look at that because you're looking for a dragon-based campaign, I would consider looking at that. I personally run a home campaign that I will do another video on that uses Fizban's Treasury of Dragon, that uses other dragon materials as well as like other fantasy concepts. But today we'll be looking at these 2 monk subclasses that are both dragon based from the official content and the Kobold Press content. Let's see how they stack up. So first off, this is the Battle of the Dragons. This is 3rd level. When you're a monk, you get your monastetic tradition at 3rd level. Starting at 3rd level, we have to decide which one we're going to go with. So we have 2 monks. One is going Way of the Ascendant Dragon. The other is going Way of the Dragon. So let's see what these 2 monks get at 3rd level. Let's start with the Ascendant. The Ascendant Dragon gets Draconic Presence. Draconic Presence is one of those abilities that can be really cool depending on the role that you're filling, and can also be super useful because there will be situations in which you get super advantage. Super advantage is an anomaly that happens in D&D where, regardless of whether you had advantage or disadvantage before the roll, whatever the result of the roll is, certain abilities allow you a second chance to roll. So if I'm rolling with advantage, I roll a 2 and a 3, and then I fail the roll. With Draconic Presence, if that was a persuasion or intimidation check, I then get to roll again to see if I succeed. So that's pretty cool. If you don't have advantage, you still get a free reroll, so it's almost like advantage, but it also only procs if you fail. This can be kind of hard because a lot of persuasion and intimidation checks don't have DCs. They have scaling. So the DM is like, all right, if you roll high enough, you get, you get this. Like if I have a lot of times where it's like there's 3 DCs when you're doing a persuasion check, and one gets you one result, the second highest one gets you a better result, and then the third DC, which is the highest, gets you the best result. So technically you don't fail as long as you get one of those results, right? Me as a DM, I would just say allow them their free reroll to see if they get higher, but that's also that's a house rule thing, or how I DM. But I went off on a tangent. Basically, Draconic Presence allows you a free reroll whenever you fail a persuasion or intimidation skill check. You get Tongue of Dragons. You can speak, read, and write Draconic. Pretty useful since you're going to be a Way of the Ascendant Dragon. You get Draconic Strike. So Draconic Strike allows you to take your unarmed strikes, and instead of doing bludgeoning damage, you convert them to elemental damage of your choice. So if I'm punching something and they seem to be like resisting my punches, because at 3rd level my punches aren't magical yet, well, maybe they don't have resistance to fire, so then my arms wreath in fire or become fire themselves, and I start doing that damage again, and now it's starting to hurt them. That's something to consider when you're playing this class, getting to choose like how you flavor the Draconic Strike. I stupidly misunderstood the wording of Draconic Strike when I first made my Ascendant Dragon, and I thought you could convert any amount of it. So I had this really cheese thing where I took the Crusher feat, and whenever I did an unarmed strike, I would do 1 point bludgeoning damage and the rest of it elemental damage. So I got the benefit of Crusher and my elemental damage. That's not how it works. You have to convert all of the damage into the elemental damage. You know, you live and you learn. And the last thing you get, which this is going to come up a lot, this is a great ability. It's the bread and butter of this subclass. It's the Dragon Breath. It's short range. I believe it's a 20-foot cone or a 30-foot line that's 5 feet wide. The breath attack does 2 martial arts damage die of the element of your choice. So if you choose lightning, fire, acid, it has to be one of the dragon elements. So you can't pick like psychic or force. But you get a breath weapon that you get to do a number of times a day equal to your proficiency bonus in lieu of an attack. So it's not when you don't have to use it as an action. It's when you take the attack action, instead of hitting them with a weapon or punching them, you make the breath weapon attack. They have to make a saving throw against your key DC. So that's something, again, remember originally we talked about considering that. This is that one of those abilities that's going to use your key DC. I believe they take half as much damage on a save. So if they save, let's say you roll 2 martial arts die, it's 2d4, because this is 3rd level. So 2d4, if they save, it's half damage. Now moving on to the Way of the Dragon. The Way of the Dragon gets Draconic Affiliation. They get to pick at 3rd level either the chromatic or the metallic dragon they're affiliated with, so they can choose red, gold, silver, green, one of those. And depending on which one they pick, they gain the corresponding resistance and skill. So red dragon has the intimidation skill and fire resistance. So you gain proficiency in the intimidation. And if you already have proficiency in intimidation, you gain expertise in intimidation. And then you also get fire resistance. So it still kind of feels like that draconic presence there with the intimidation proficiency or intimidation expertise, depending if you pick the background that gave you intimidation, because the monk as a class, I don't believe gives you intimidation as one of the choices. So consider that as well when you're picking your backgrounds. And then you also get fire resistance. I'm a big damage mitigation guy. I played a very tanky character as one of my favorite characters, Korndoth. He was a Goliath, Forge Knight, or Forge Cleric Rune Knight. So I had the cold resistance from the Goliath, fire resistance from the Forge Cleric. And then as the Rune Knight, there was a rune that gave me like resistance to poison. So I had 3 resistances, and then later I got a magic item that let me pick a elemental resistance once per day, and like I could have that. So I always had at least 4 resistances, which was awesome. Damage mitigation, I fell in love with it. So I love resistances, even though they don't always come up. So the other, that's something to keep in mind here. Whatever resistance you pick, this is a permanent choice. You don't get to change it. Just keep that in mind when you make your choice. You also gain Draconic Onslaught. Draconic Onslaught allows you to use Step of the Wind before taking your attack action. So bonus action, Step of the Wind, costs 1 key point. And then you get to do an extra, when you take the attack action, so you do an extra 2d6 of your affiliation damage. So I picked red. So I'm now going to do an extra 2d6 fire damage. And at 3rd level, my martial arts die are 1d4. So this 2d6 is technically more than if I did 2 extra unarmed strikes. The issue you're going to run into here is it is taking your bonus action to do this. So you don't get to use Flurry of Blows, unfortunately. But that's level 3. Let's move on. It's been a few levels. Both of our combatants have gotten a little bit more experience. So let's see where we're at, because we are now at level 6. Ascendant Dragon, Way of the Dragon. At level 6, the Ascendant Dragon gets Wings Unfurled. Basically, whenever you use Step of the Wind, you get a fly speed equal to your walking speed. So So you get to fly. Whenever you burn a key point as a bonus action and use Step of the Wind, you get these spectral wings and woof, off you go. Pretty cool, especially since Step of the Wind, you can use dash or disengage. It still costs a key point, so that's something to consider, and you don't get any extra like damage, no shields, no nothing. Like, you just get a fly speed, which can be very good, but also kind of situational. If you're in a dungeon or something like that, this isn't going to help you too much. But there are situations where this will be useful. The Way of the Dragon gets a similar ability. It's called Take Flight. Take Flight doesn't require you to use Step of the Wind, it just requires you to take the dash action. So you can get the dash action as a bonus action outside of Step of the Wind. I believe there's an orc race that allows you to do it. I can't remember if it's orc or half orc, but one of them allows you to basically rush as a bonus action or take a dash as a bonus action and get temp HP or something like that. There's feats that give you a feat that gives you the ability to, I think it's Charger. You get to take dash action. So the only caveat is that you take the dash action. It doesn't matter how you take the dash action, where you get it from. Let's say you even multi-classed Rogue, so now you have Cunning action, so you can just use Cunning action. You then burn a key point. So this is why that distinction was important, because you have to burn the extra key point. So if you use Step of the Wind to take the dash action, you burn the key point for Step of the Wind. That does not meet the necessary key point expenditure for Take Flight. So you would burn a key point for Step of the Wind if you decide to use Step of the Wind, and then you would have to burn a second key point to gain the fly speed. Now, the cool thing about this is while you're flying, or while you have that fly speed, you basically get whatever your affiliation is. So ours, we chose fire, right? So just imagine you get wreathed in fire. It doesn't protect you from damage, but what it does do is when anyone takes an attack of opportunity against you while you're moving, they take 2d6 damage, fire damage, because remember, we chose red. So whatever, if you chose a different damage, if you chose lightning or poison, they take that damage type. But that's it for level 6. Not a lot, but you're still a monk. You're getting these monk abilities in between here or there. I believe level 7 you get, is that the one where you get to end an action? Still, I can't remember. You're getting monk abilities outside of this. So this is just the subclass abilities. So now let's move on to level 11. It is when things start to get interesting. You start to get more versatility within your subclass. So we've got Ascendant Dragon, Way of the Dragon. Starting with Ascendant Dragon, you get Aspect of the Worm. Basically an aura. You trigger the aura as a bonus action, and it lasts for a minute. When you trigger this aura, you pick one creature that is within the aura, and they have to make a wisdom saving throw against your key DC. The target fails, they're frightened. The aura also allows you to pick a damage type, an elemental damage type, and gain resistance for the duration of the aura. That's pretty cool. So for 1 minute, you have resistance, and when you activate it, a creature within your aura has to make a wisdom saving throw. But it's only one creature, so you don't get to pick a handful, you just got to pick one. Now, Way of the Dragon gets a little bit more complicated of an ability. It's called Conquering Worm. This is a little formula I put up here. It might make it a little easier to understand. So, Conquering Worm requires you, similar to how the previous abilities worked, you have to use Step of the Wind first. Right? So you use Step of the Wind, and then you burn 2 key points, and you get to make, and then you take your attack action. So Step of the Wind, expend 2 key points. So you have to use your 1 key point for Step of the Wind. Remember. And then after you do that, you burn 2 more key points. And then when you take your next attack action on that turn, you forego the first attack and instead do 4d6 unarmed strike damage to any enemy within 5 feet of you. I know that sounds really complicated, but let me give you 2 kinds of scenarios where this is usable. You are facing off with a baddie, but then you see your friends the tank's getting overwhelmed. You're fighting the boss, you ran up, you're hitting him, but the boss's like 3 lieutenants are ganging up on the barbarian, and the barbarian's getting just pummeled. Well, you use Step of the Wind to disengage from the main bad guy. You then expend 2 key points while you're moving over to your barbarian. And when you get there and stop, you take the attack action, but instead of hitting the one target, you hit everyone that's within 5 feet of you that you want to hit. And that, so basically auto hits. And they take 4d6 unarmed strike damage, which your unarmed strike should be magical at this point, if I'm not mistaken. So if you position yourself right, you're doing 4d6 to 2 different targets minimum. Even if another expenditure of this or example of this is if you use Step of the Wind to dash, burn your 2 key points, so now you've burned 3 key points. You can even burn a 4th key point to use the 6th level ability to gain the fly speed and the extra 2d6 whatever damage. And then when you go, you get up to the boss, and you now get to make your AoE attack, allowing you to do 4d6 unarmed strike damage to him. Now, even though the boss is just a single target, he's still within 5 feet of you. Maybe you were having a hard time hitting the boss. Well, now you're just doing 4d6 unarmed strike damage. You hit. At least that's how I read it. Read through it again, talk to your DM, make sure they understand it that way, because you don't want to pull this out at the table and then there's all kinds of confusion. I also believe the 3rd level ability stacks on this as well. So because the 3rd ability just requires whenever you use Step of the Wind, you can then make an unarmed strike. The next unarmed strike you make does 2d6 lightning or fire damage because it's your affiliation damage. So I think this would also be... It's complicated. I should have done more research before doing this video, but talk it out with your DM if you're going to use this, because I believe there might be a way to stack that first 2d6 you get with the 3rd level ability with the 11th level ability when you use Step of the Wind. But yeah, the Conquering Worm is a little complicated, but it can really handle mobs. If you find yourself surrounded, if you're playing a more tanky character, if you found yourself in combat and you're just like, I need to disengage, but before I disengage, let me disengage, hit everyone in the face, and then bounce. Well, shoot, now I need to familiarize myself with disengage rules, because if you disengage and then attack, are you now re-engaged? I don't know. It's complicated. I probably should have done a little bit more research into that stuff. I'm not realizing those questions until I'm covering it. Talk to your DM about it. Those rulings are going to be a lot of house rules or a lot of rules lawyering to see which works. If it stacks, that's amazing, because then you're doing 66 on that first one you hit, and then all the others are getting 46, or your trash mine. It can be amazing if the rules allow it to be. I'm not a rules lawyer. I put this in the rules lawyer court. Comment down below if this would mechanically, if the 3rd level ability and the 11th level ability, and even the 6th level ability, if you could stack all 3 of those using the Conquering Worm if you burn the appropriate amount of key points. But got way too in the weeds there. Let's move on. let's move on to 17th level. This is the last level. This is the bread and butter. You are in the 4th tier of gameplay. You are punching gods in the face. So let's see what your punching gods in the face abilities are going to be. The Ascendant Dragon gains Ascendant Aspect. You can expend 1 key point to increase your breath weapon. Wait a minute. Let me go back. I think I missed something. I did. I missed something at 11th level. I apologize, guys. So at 11th level, the Ascendant Dragon's breath weapon increases in damage die and I believe range. No, just damage die. So the breath weapon goes from 2 martial arts die to 3 martial arts die. Sorry about that. Alright, so the Ascendant Aspect at 17th level, you burn 1 key point and you increase the attack range of your breath weapon by 3. So what does that mean? You go from a 20-foot cone to a 60-foot cone. You go from a 30-foot line to a 90-foot line. And the martial arts damage die is increased to 4. Now remember, your martial arts damage have been increasing this entire time. I want to say these are D10 now, maybe D8s, maybe D10s, but you're doing 4 of them. And it's an AoE attack. That's pretty bonkers. If you line it up right, you can hit a lot of enemies with a oogle load of damage. You also gain blind sight for 10 feet, which if you're trying to get as many enemies in your aura as possible, you're probably in the thick of it. So blind sight is helpful if there are invisible enemies coming up and hitting you, or if you don't have dark vision and you're just walking in the dark. You know, it can be pretty useful. You also, your aura ability at 11th level gets improved, because now when you activate that aura ability, the aspect of the worm from 11th level, remember, you get to pick 1 creature and that creature gets to make a wisdom save. Well, now not only do you get to do that, every creature of your choice within the aura has to make a dex save and take 3d10 damage, elemental damage of your choice on a failed save, or half as much on a successful save. So there's 1 enemy is making a wisdom and a dex save, and all the enemies are making a dex save. Sorry about that. So that's pretty cool. That's the 17th level abilities. You've got, basically, you're just an aura of destruction and fear. Pretty cool. 17th level, Way of the Dragon gets Scales of the Worm. Scales of the Worm burns a lot of ki, but you get a lot of benefits from it. You get to burn 4 ki points, and for 10 minutes, you have +2 to your AC and temporary hit points equal to your monk level. So let's say we're at 17th level when this procced. We now have 17 HP as well as +2 AC, which we need both of those things due to low AC and low HP. We have a 1d8. We may have improved our con by now. We may have improved our wisdom a little bit to help with that AC, but that you're still going to want those extra things, and this is going to help. Temp HP is nothing to scoff at. There are probably other avenues in which you can get temp HP at this level, but that temp HP, it can be game changing. 1 temp HP can be game changing depending on the fight. You become immune to the frightened condition, so you cannot be feared. No, you are feared. You cannot be afeared. Afraid. I'm kidding. And then during that 10 minutes, anytime you take elemental damage, you can spend your reaction to gain immunity to your affiliation. So you're resistant to fire damage, but if that red dragon, that ancient red dragon breathes his fire breath on you, or because we're looking at Fizbins, let's say that aspect of the worm or the great worm red dragon breathes its fire breath weapon on you, that resistance isn't going to do much with your low HP. Now, as a monk, you are proficient in all saving throws, I believe. So you have a good chance of halving that, and then your resistance halves it. But why not spend your reaction and just not take any of the damage? Frankly, that seems... And you're also immune to it. So if you're fighting... Let's say you're fighting 2 ancient red dragons, or you're fighting an ancient red dragon and then a bunch of, like, fire-based minions, you'd spend that reaction, and you're immune to the fire damage until your turn. And you also have plus 2 AC, and plus 17 HP, temp HP. And the dragon's frightful presence doesn't work against you. That's for 10 minutes. There's no combat that goes past 10 minutes. Not in-game 10 minutes. Real-life combat takes like 3 sessions, but that is a tank. That is a tank. So, considerations. We have now looked at all 4 of the levels in which the subclasses gain abilities. We looked at those abilities. We compared them at each level, and we just went through, and we didn't go too deep in it, except for the few times I had to give like explanations of how it worked mechanically. So now let's look at them and come up with like a summary, like kind of a key takeaways. So the Ascendant Dragon relies on saving throws, which you don't want those to be low. But they might be, because the Ascendant Dragon is also a combatant. They are in the thick of it. They have this aura ability. Their breath weapon's super awesome, so that might keep them at range for a little bit. But all in all, you're most likely in the thick of it. So you're going to want con, and you're going to want your unarmed strikes to be up there, because especially with Draconic Strike, because Draconic Strike, you may be the only one in the party sometimes that can damage something. If you're fighting a creature that has immunity to damage against bludgeoning, slashing, or piercing weapons that aren't magical or silvered, your unarmed strikes might be the only real damage being done. So keep that in mind. That you're probably going to be in the thick of it, but a lot of your abilities depend on saving throws. Those breath weapons, saving throws. The aura ability, saving throws. All against your key DC, so you're going to need a decent wisdom, which then takes away from the other abilities. You get some face abilities, you get the fearing ability, you get the draconic oh god, I can't remember what it was called, and I just did this whole video. You get the advantage or the re-roll on charisma checks. That's all cool. That's very niche, especially since you're probably not going to have a high charisma anyway. You're already a mad build, so unless you rolled God on your stats, you're probably going to have a low charisma. You might not even be proficient in those charisma abilities, so you really shouldn't be making them when you're making them. The breath attack. The breath attack comes online at 3rd level, improves at 11th level, and then for the cost of 1 key point can be improved again at 17th level. This is the bread and butter of this subclass. The breath attack is amazing. You don't have to forego an action to make the breath attack. It's just whenever you take the attack action, you forego one of your attacks to make the breath attack. So when you have multi-attack that comes online at 5th level, you can breath attack and then still unarmed strike, and then bonus action, flurry of blows, 2 more unarmed strikes. So you're still getting 3 punches off, and you're breathing whatever damage type you want to breathe. That's pretty amazing. So, Way of the Dragon. Their big drawback, realistically, is they spend a lot of key points. A lot of their abilities require key point usage. You have to closely monitor how many key points you have, how often you're using them. Are you going to get a short rest after this combat? Because you need to use key points at pretty much every subclass ability, except for at 3rd level you don't need to use any key points. But I also believe that's the same for Ascendant Dragon. So you're using a lot of your key points, so you have to closely monitor that pool. Mob combat. So this goes to the face abilities being kind of niche. Mob combat's kind of niche, especially when you're doing like high damage mob combat, or maybe swarms. I do Undead Store campaign recently. We just started it. We actually started a little bit ago, but there are mobs, and some of them are more powerful mobs. So like, you're not just fighting a bunch of like CR1 half or CR1 creatures. Like there's like 5 CR2 or CR3 creatures, and a Way of the Dragon Monk might benefit that, but that's very niche situations. A lot of their movement and avoiding getting hit and doing damage all around, that's cool, and that can come in on, that can come online and be really game changing, or it could not. It really depends on your campaign. This is a tankier monk though. You are incentivized to use Step of the Wind. 17th level, it's not, you get resistance at 3rd level. 17th level, you get the ability to just be untouchable, or when you're touched, it doesn't matter as much. You get extra damage. You get fly speed with a retaliation shield. I keep wanting to say damage shield, but it doesn't actually stop any damage. It just makes sure anyone that hits you with an attack of opportunity takes damage. So this is a very like baity monk. This is a kiting monk. This monk wants people to try and hit him, especially with his affiliation type. It's pretty cool that you can, with this build, you can kind of make a monk tank. So with all that being said, we're now going to get into the Victor. Because remember, we weren't just looking at these two different subclasses to look at them. We're going to decide which one was better. I asked around, talked to a few people on the interwebs, talked to a couple other DMs and friends before I made this video to kind of guide which one I think takes home the trophy. But before I announce that, I want to ask you to consider which one you give the trophy to, based on everything we've read. If you've played either of these subclasses before in any campaigns, however you come to the conclusion, I want you to think, which one do you think won? And I want you to go down to the comments below and let me know. At the end of this video, go down there, let me know which one you thought won, if you agreed with me, disagreed with me, or if we came to the same conclusion just with different equations or for different reasons. Let me know. If you have cool stories about using these monks in a campaign, drop those as well. I would love all of that, especially when going forward and doing future videos. But now, we're going to move on to find out which monk won the Ascendant. I know that's probably not a surprise, or maybe it is. Maybe you're like, wait, Wizards of the Coast, third-party content's supposed to be overpowered, or Kobold Press is amazing at most of the stuff they write. How is Wizards of the Coast having a better subclass? Well, let's calm down, because they're monk subclasses. Overall, they're going to be outpaced by other classes altogether. But when comparing these two, I came in expecting the Way of the Dragon to win, frankly. At first glance, I was under the impression that Way of the Dragon would win. The more I wrote this stuff down and looked at it objectively, the Ascendant takes the cake. And here's why. The Breath Weapon was just too great of an obstacle for the Way of the Dragon to overcome. The Ascendant Dragon's Breath Weapon coming online at 3rd level, improving at 11th level, and then getting even better at 17th level for the cost of a single key point. Now remember, the breath weapon doesn't require a key. It just forego one of your attacks when you take the attack action. That is phenomenal. And yes, it has your key DC. It sucks that you have to make sure you have a high key DC, but it also does multiple martial arts die damage, and it does that against multiple targets because it's an AoE effect. That is amazing. It really is. It created a gap too wide for the Kobold Press Monk subclass to overcome. The fly speed was easy. It wasn't confusing. It wasn't a lot of extra mumbo jumbo. The problem with it was just step of the wind, gain a fly speed. You didn't even have to use it. Didn't even have to use the fly speed. Just step of the wind, you gain a fly speed. Do with that what you will. The aura. I mean, self-explanatory. You just have an aura of greatness around you. Now that I talked about why the Ascendant Dragon won, I want to talk about why the Way of the Dragon lost. No Draconic, so I'm going to start with flavor. At 3rd level, the Ascendant Dragon gains the ability to read, write, and Draconic. The Way of the Dragon does not get that. Now, I'm 100% sure that was a simple oversight. I guarantee you, rules as intended, the Way of the Dragon can speak, read, or write Draconic. Almost guarantee it. But that's not in the book. So, going off of the book, your Way of the Dragon doesn't speak dragon. Little crazy. The skill and resistance, the affiliation. The affiliation is cool, is a cool concept. The problem is the skills and the resistances don't match. They don't jive. The resistances that you're most likely to want, which are fire and cold, because those are probably going to be the ones that come up the most in most generic campaigns, have intimidation and history tied to them. I can't think of any of my previous campaigns I've ran, or even the one time I played a monk, that I ever attempted a history or an intimidation check as a monk. I just can't. And you don't get advantage in these checks. You don't get expertise. You most likely get proficiency, because as a monk, you're probably not going to be proficient in these skills. And you say, well, what about the other ones? Well, the other skills that you're going to want have resistances that don't matter, like lightning and acid. Those are kind of meh resistances. They don't come up often. And then poison resistance, which has, I believe, the stealth skill, which you're like, oh, I'll have proficiency in stealth because I'm a monk. Now I have expertise in stealth, and I get poison resistance. That's a win-win, except for the poison resistance is going to become null void at level 10. Now, here's the thing. As a player, when I pick a class, and then I pick a race, and one takes away from the other, it's not that big of a deal because I'm obviously making a creative choice. So if I pick a dwarf that has poison resistance, and then I know a monk is going to gain immunity to poison and disease at level 10, I'm not that hurt by it because I'm still gaining that resistance until level 10, and then I'm losing resistance to poison post level 10 because I lose a racial feature. It's not that big of a deal. Dwarfs have other racial features I get to benefit from. It was more of a flavor choice anyways. But when the subclass directly conflicts with the main class by giving you the option to permanently, there's the other thing, the affiliation's a permanent choice. So you permanently choose to be resistant. Use this 3rd level ability to become resistant to poison, only for that to be overshadowed by your 10th level ability that grants you immunity. Yeah, I mean, you get expertise in stealth. That's really what that ends up being. Resistance until you have immunity and you have expertise in stealth. Cool. Again, I don't see what stealth really gets you unless you're playing an infiltrator campaign or a heist campaign, and at that point, there's other monk subclasses you should take, or you should just multi-class rogue. But yeah, my fix for, but this is an easy fix, right? So this is an easy fix, and hear me out. If they just made the affiliation something you can change on a short rest, boom, fixes the problem. Yeah, you may gain a resistance that you don't need, but you're doing it because you need that skill. Or you may gain skill proficiency or expertise that you don't need, but that's because you know you're about to go into a combat where you need that resistance. It gives you a little bit more choice and flexibility. That's the easiest way to fix that so far or the easy way to fix the Way of the Dragon is to give it proficiency in the Draconic language and make the affiliation something that you can change after a short rest or a long rest. And I don't think either of those choices make this subclass overpowered. So, purity of body versus green affiliation, it voids itself. This goes back to what I was saying about how the Ascendant doesn't use any key points. The Way of the Dragon uses so many key points. Not only does it use so many key points, it has you moving all over the battlefield. You have to dash. You have to use Step of the Wind for a lot of these abilities. You have to use your bonus action in a non-beneficial way. The monk is the best when you're freeing up their bonus action for Flurry of Blows so they can attempt the stunning strikes. Step of the Wind is an ability you use when the situation calls for it. You do not create situations in which Step of the Wind is needed, because 9 times out of 10, punching someone in the face twice with your unarmed strikes is going to be better than dashing or disengaging. So the fact that your 6th level ability, your 11th level ability, and even actually your 3rd level ability, 6th level ability, and 11th level ability all depend on you taking that Step of the Wind or dash. And again, if you can stack those abilities, like if you can, the rules lawyers are going to talk about it and debate it in the comments section, hopefully. But if you can stack those 3 abilities at 11th level, that can be kind of cool and fun still. But it's so niche. It's so, you're expending a lot of key points. You're moving all over the place. And frankly, I don't see a lot of campaigns where you're gonna benefit from this much increased movement. I just don't see it. Yeah, that's what I just said. It keeps spending all those key points and taking away from Flurry of Blows. Another point is it keeps doubling down on the dash action, but you have increased movement. You have an extra 10 feet at 2nd or 3rd level or whatever, and then it goes up as you level up. And if you picked a race that already had an increased movement speed, you're now just the dash is decentralized, because why do you need to move 200 feet and around when the room is only 40 feet by 50 feet? So you're doing all this extra stuff or putting all these extra mechanics on there that, honestly, I'd take the dash, the disengage action, or the dash action, and just, I don't know if you can just not use it. Can you just use the dash action, but not take the movement? Because a lot of these abilities are going to require that. You gain your 17th level ability allows you to gain immunity to being frightened. I think they could have replaced that with something else, because Stillness of Mind just allows you to free up in the frightened condition on yourself. And I know that costs an action versus just outright having immunity to it when you use your 17th level ability. But if I'm burning 4 key points, I don't know, make it immune to frightened and charmed. Make it a little more something. Frankly, the 17th level ability would have been better if it was the 11th level ability, and then they gave 17th level something else, because biting off 4 key points at 11th level is a big commitment, but getting +2 AC and your monk level and temp HP, as well as reaction damage immunity, that can be pretty cool. That can be pretty powerful, but I don't think overly powerful at level 11, because again, if you're playing it correctly and you have two, like the adventuring day, the way it's meant to be played, you have 2 short rests in a day, you're going to get your key points back, but you're still at 11 key points at 11th level, or 12 key points. 4 puts you down a good bit. That's a big commitment. So just keep that in mind when you're looking at that. Again, at 17th level, it's not as big of a commitment, but I just still think it would be a better 11th level ability. Overall, the Way of the Dragon, it might be good in very specific campaigns, maybe an infiltrator build, which again, that I would only take this if I was trying to fill both the damage. If I was in a 3-person party and I needed to be the damage dealer and the infiltrator, I would take this build. Or if I know I'm going into like Icewind Dale, I'll eat the proficiency in history to have cold resistance. Again, all in all, the Way of the Dragon just does not keep up with the Ascendant Dragon. Now, I'm going to do more content for Tome of Heroes. Don't let this bring your hopes down. For those who are looking for Tome of Hero content, or were planning on using it in your campaign, Tome of Heroes is really good. There's a lot of stuff I've been enjoying from it. My party just started using the spells from it. I've been looking at the races. I believe my next video is going to be Warforged versus Gearforged. So we'll do a similar lineup like this and compare the two. It's just, when it comes to the monk, I think they went for a very niche build, a very filling a specific role, that I would like to know what the creator was thinking, what role he had in mind or she had in mind when they made this, because it feels like it's specific. It feels like it has intention, and maybe I just don't see it. But that's all I have. The Ascendant Monk wins. If you want to play a dragon-based monk subclass, I would pick the Ascendant Monk.